Hello everyone, my name is Pradyumna Sharma and I am an assistant professor in the Mewar University. Today's topic I am going to teach you is the Factories Act 1948. The Factories Act 1948 is a special legislation regarding specific type of industries in the field of manufacturing. Factories Act 1948 applies to factory, and the definition of factory is defined in Section 2M of the Factories Act 1948. Section 2M defines the factory under the influence of the power. Subsection 1 says when in the factory, in the manufacturing process, whenever there are 10 or more than 10 workers are working with the aid of power, then it is called a factory. When the workers work without the aid of power and the number of workers is 20 or more than 20, then it is also called a factory uh, in the Factories Act 1948. And what is not called a factory is the mines which are operated under the Mines Act 1952. Any mobile unit of the armed forces is not factory. Railway running shed is not factory. Eating place or the restaurant dhabas are not the factory. So the Factory Act 1948 defines the meaning of the factory, which is regarding the aid of the power. Manufacturing process. Factories are special type of industries dealing in the manufacturing process, and the term manufacturing process is defined in section 2K, which says manufacturing means altering, repairing, ornamenting, finishing of the product, or pumping oil, water, sewage or any other substance, or generating or transforming or transmitting of power, or any such thing which is related to manufacturing. And the definition of manufacturing process is broad under the Manufacturing Act 1948, which also envisages constructing, reconstructing and repairing or refitting of the ships or vessels. So the definition of the manufacturing process is broad under the Factories Act of 1948. So there is one more important definition, which is occupier. Occupier of a factory means a person who has ultimate control over its affairs. So occupier is the person who has the ultimate control over the affairs of the factory. And there are also defined the ages of a person under which they will be called the child, adult or adolescent. If a person who has not completed the age of 15 years is child, the person who has completed the age of 15 years but has not completed the age of 18 year is adolescent, and any person who has completed his 18 years is called a adult. Objectives and scope of Factories Act. First, the history of the Factories Act. The Factories Act was firstly enacted in India in 1881 under the rule of British. Then in the 1934, 1881 Act was replaced under the recommendation of the Royal Commission on Labour, and the Factories Act 1934 was legislated. Then again, when India got its freedom, at that time the Factories Act 1948, the act we are reading now, this Factories Act 1948 was consolidated and amended on 28 August 1948 by our Constituent Assembly, and it came into force from the 1st April 1949. Objectives of the Factories Act 1948 Act is to regulate the working conditions in the factories, to provide for the health, safety, welfare, and annual leaves of the workers in the factory. So, Factories Act 1948 provides for many provisions. It also provides enactment for approval, licensing, and registration of the factories. So, factories can get their approval, their license, and registration from the chief inspector, or by applying to the state government to obtain the license or permission under the framed uh, by rules. Factories Act provides special provisions for the inspecting staff in the Chapter 2 of the Factories Act. Under Section 8 of the Factories Act, there is a provision to appoint an inspector in the factories. In subsection 4 of section 8, every district magistrate shall be an inspector for his district. Other than the inspector, there can be such other number of inspectors which can be appointed by the state government in the official notification. With the aid of inspector, there will be a chief inspector, joint inspectors, or the deputy chief inspectors, and there they will use the power as will be prescribed by the government. So the state government provides for the powers of the inspector, and those powers are to check the factories, buildings, machines, and materials, to go into the location with government assistance to the suspected factory for the investigation. Inspector can ask to see factory records or documents which are required by law. Inspectors can use any other such power which the law prescribed for. So the inspector has the power to inspect the factory premises and the precincts, to investigate, to inquire for the application of the provisions of the Factories Act. One of the best provisions which the Factories Act provides for is the health provisions. The health provisions are prescribed in Chapter 3 in 10 sections from section 11 to 20, which describes elaborate provisions for the health regarded provisions of the workers. Section 11 provides for the cleanliness. In the factory, there should be a proper cleanliness so the work can be done efficiently. Section 12 provides for the disposal of wastes and effluents. It is a duty of a occupier to keep his factory clean and dispose the wastes and materials, unwanted materials, through proper disposal techniques. Health provisions related section is section 14 regarding dust and fume. If an industry, in some processes the dust and the fume arises, it is a duty of the occupier to clean the dust and fume from the factory so the workers can work efficiently and their health remain well. Artificial humidification. It is a duty of the occupier to maintain the humidification, and the water which will be needed to humidify the water should be a drinking water. Water should be clean and pure. Section 16 provides protection from the overcrowding. In the factory, there should be such number of workmen for whom the space is prescribed so that uh, there is no overcrowding. Section 17 provides for the proper lighting in the factory premises and precincts. There should be a proper lightning, so the work can be done efficiently and no one can be harmed. Section 18 provides for the drinking water provisions, and when there are more than 250 workers, it is a duty of occupier to install a cold water system so the workers can get the cold water. Section 19 prescribes for the latrines and urinals, and they are the broad definitions under which it says there should be a proper latrine and urinals separately for male and female. They should be properly cleaned, and the minimum 19 centimeter of height of tiles should be used in the latrine and urinals, so it can be properly be kept clean. Spittoons should be placed in the factory premises so the workers and employers can use those spittoons, and if spittoons are being used unwaringly, then there is a provision for rupees 5 fine of rupees 5. Safety provisions are one of the best provisions under the Factories Act 1948, which provides for the fencing of a machinery. Work on uh, the work the worker which have to work near the machine in the motion, then their notice should be kept. Safety provisions are prescribed in Chapter 4 of the Factories Act 1948. These are related so the work can be done efficiently and the no worker can be harmed. So the sections 21 to 41 provides for safety provisions, which has a provision regarding pressure plant, floor, stairs and means of access, regarding the excessive weights, protection of eyes should be done of the worker by the occupier. Safety of building and machinery need to be maintained by the occupier. Maintenance of the building should be done on proper time. There should be a precautions in case of fire. So there is a very broad 20 number of sections are for the safety regarding provision in the Factories Act. Then there are provisions regarding the hazardous process. Hazardous process are the process uh, in the manufacturing units which can cause the serious injury or which may involve serious hazards to the workers, and these can be hazards in the uh, industries, which are of 29 types in the schedule first of the Factories Act 1948, and such type of industries are cement industries, power generating industries, fertilizer industries, electroplating industries. So there are 29 number of types of industries or the factories which need to follow the provisions regarding the hazardous process, which which provides for the special authority to investigate and a regular checkup. Welfare provisions are one of the main aspect in the Factories Act, and the welfare provisions are prescribed in section 42 to 50. Section 42 talks about the washing facilities. There should be a separate, well screened washing facilities for both male and female. There should be a facilities for storing and drying clothing. There should be a facilities for sitting, since the workers have to work for much time standing, so there should be a proper facility for sitting. There should be a first aid appliances in the factory under section 45, and when the worker are more than 150 numbers in the factory, when in the factory there are more than 150 number of workers, then there should be a in charge of a person certified in first aid treatment recognized by state government uh, for maintaining the first aid box and to check the workers. And when in the factory there are more than 500 number of workers, then it is mandatory for the factory to maintain an ambulance room and to provide for a medical staff who can check on the any emergency. Section 46 provides for the canteens in the factory. When in the canteen, uh, canteen will be necessarily maintained in the factories which has more than 250 number of workers. In a factory where more than 250 number of workers work, then their canteen should be maintained in the factory. This provision of canteen is in section 46 of the um, Factories Act 1948. It is also a duty of the occupier to provide for the shelter, restrooms and lunch rooms when in the workers there are more than 150 number of workers working in the factory premises, and they should also maintain the space which should be well lit and ventilated. There should be a drinking water facility. Section 48 provides for the welfare of children which are born in the factories who has more than 30 number of women workers. In the factories where more than 30 number of women works, there need to be a crutches for the children of those women workers who are below the age of 6 years. This is also one of the provisions, uh, one of the best provisions in the Factories Act, which uh, envisages the equal protection in the work field to the women. And the provisions related to crèches is in section 48, which also provides that there should be a woman supervisor in the child care room. The provision of welfare officer is in section 49. It says in the factory where more than 500 workers work, it is a duty of the occupier to employ the welfare officer. Factories Act 1948 also provides for the defined working hours of the adults. Adults means the person uh, who is over the age of 18 years is an adult, and the provisions of our working hours for adult is in section 51, which says no adult worker is required to work more than 48 hours in a week. So no worker should be required or need to do any work more than 48 hours in a week. Factories Act also provides for a weekly holiday. Every worker in a factory should get a weekly holiday, and in no case worker cannot be forced to work consecutively for more than 10 days. At least in any condition, workers should be given a full holiday in 10 consecutive working days. There are provisions regarding the compensatory holidays. Provision regarding the daily hours of work says that no worker is required and no worker will be allowed to work in a factory for more than 9 hours. It is to protect the exploitation of a worker in the factories. There are provision for the intervals for rest in the factories. Under section 55 it says no person will work more than 5 hours continuously. There should be a rest period after maximum 5 hours of work, and which should be at least rest should be of at least half an hour. There is a good provision regarding the spread over of the workers period of work. It is mandatory eh, for an occupier to not take work more than 10 and a half hours in a day from any worker. So a worker can work in any company in one day is 10 and half hours. There is a provision for extra wages for overtime. There is a special provisions regarding the safety of the woman, which may also seem sometimes inequality to the employment of a woman. In the Factories Act, it is prohibited for a woman to work between 7 p.m. in the evening to 6 a.m. in the morning. It is prohibited. It is restricted for a woman to work in the night. In some conditions, young persons can work in the factory. Generally, generally in the factory, adults work, but because of the need of the job for to maintain their livelihood, it is sometimes mandatory for some persons to work. So there is a bar on the working of young persons, but the employment related provisions of young persons is allowed when the certificate of fitness under section 69 is issued by a certificate surgeon who says a person uh, above the age of 15 years is certified to work in a factory, then he can work in a factory, but their register should be separate than the adult workers. Children under the age of 14 years are barred to work in the factory, as it is also a constitutional provision. So there is a provision of employment of young persons after the proper certification of the certifying surgeon. There is a working hours for children also. Children who has completed his 14 year and yet has not reached the age of 15 years, they can work after the fitness of certificate under section 69, and the work which can carried in the factory is for 4.5 hours in a day. Children, a young person uh, cannot work for more than 4.5 hours in a day in a factory. Then there are provision for annual leave with wages, and this is one of the best provisions in the Factories Act for the employees. It provides in under section 79 that the person who has worked for more than 240 days, that is 6 months, should be entitled to leave with wages for 1 day leave of wages uh, uh, in comparison to 20 days of work. An, an adult is entitled for a paid 1 day leave for the work which he has done in the 20 days. So there is a provision for annual leave with wages in the section 79. Thank you. These are one of the best provisions prescribed in the Factories Act 1948. It is a good act, a legislation for the protection and benefit of workers in the factory. Thank you. This was Pradyumna Sharma. Take care. Have a nice day.